right, so I'm Marty Mercado, and I'm the Director of Development here at Aging Matters in Brevard. And September is the National Suicide Prevention Week, which took place from Monday, September 7th through Saturday, September 12th. Suicide ranks as the 10th leading cause of deaths in the United States. Elderly Americans 65 and older account for more than 20% of all suicidal deaths, with males being the most vulnerable. That's just an incredible statistics. Close to 70% of adults 65 and older know very little about depression. With COVID upon us, and we all know things have changed, as you see, all of us are zooming in here from different places all over Brevard County. Isolation has become a huge problem with our older adults. Now more than ever, we need to have discussions. We need to discuss about how caregivers and older adults can get the mental health they need during this time. Our goal here today is to talk about our mental health concerns for our older adults, to talk about specific ways that caregivers can help and what resources are in the community. So I'd like to take a moment and allow each one of our wonderful guests today to introduce themselves. They are experts in the field and are full of knowledge nuggets. That's one of my favorite things. Knowledge nuggets is what we need right now to help us through this time. So first, let's start with Allison. She works with me at Aging Matters in Brevard. Hello, Allie. You want to tell us a little bit about your background and why you're here today to help with this?
Sure, absolutely. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. So I have been with Aging Matters for it'll hit about 3 years next year, the beginning of the year. I was over the home care program, was with them for a couple years initially, and then got into this position a little over a year ago. So it's been a huge opportunity for me to be able to really spread a lot of my knowledge and help out as much as I can in the community with all of our seniors and offering everything that I can offer to Brevard County to keep our seniors safe in their home. I graduated in the late 90s, in 98, from Sacred Heart University with a bachelor's of social work. And since graduating, I have worked with all the way down from children in Department of Children and Families all the way up to the seniors now. Kind of in between in home health and the marketing and the nursing homes, and really kind of everything in between. Mental illness also. That was actually one of my first jobs out of college, was helping adults with mental illness, pretty severe mental illness, schizophrenia, multiple personality, with their jobs and helping them on a job site. So I've been able to learn a lot in the position and all the time of working here as well as out in the community in Massachusetts and in Florida. So it's great to be able to help our seniors and continue to be able to give them everything that we possibly can in Brevard County to make sure that they're safe. So thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Allie is a valuable resource to us. She really cares about the community that she's involved with and works with, and we love having her with us. So thank you for being here. Second, I'd like to introduce to you Lisa Conway. Would you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the community?
Yes, thank you. I'm Lisa Conway. I'm a registered nurse and a certified care manager. I have been a registered nurse since 1996. I started my nursing career as a psychiatric nurse. I ran the inpatient psychiatric unit, one of the local inpatient psychiatric units, for about 10 years. Since then, though, I have been at one senior place for the last 7 years, and we work with trying to keep our elderly population at home and as active and healthy, both physically and emotionally, as we can. We also provide resources for families to be able to, help keep their family members socialized and active and healthy, again, both physically and emotionally. So I'm really happy that you had me come and share some of our resources and our tricks for helping our elderly community maintain good mental health. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. We're excited that you're here. All right, let's get to know Kevin. Kevin, tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're here today.
Yeah, sure. My name is Kevin Carraro. I'm with Palm Point Behavioral Health. I've got 20 plus years as experience as a behavior analyst. working in the community with children and families, and also our senior caregivers, which is pretty prominent in our county. And my recent role with Palm Point has got me working more in the senior space. I've had the opportunity to meet with Lisa and Allie and different people in the field, and just wanted to be part of this so we could chat further about kind of what is needed to improve the mental health of our seniors in our community. And I also have the unique role of being a caregiver at one point for my father, who is now in assisted living. So I kind of bring a unique perspective where I have some of the clinical background, and I also have the sort of the personal stories as well that I think could be beneficial to those who might be in the community and are not quite sure where to turn at this point. So I appreciate being here. I know Sarah and I are thrilled to be here, and really looking forward to establishing the relationships with you because of all the good work you do in the community. So thanks for having me.
We're glad to have you. And, you brought up a good point. I was a caregiver for my grandfather and my grandmother and my father while they were dying, and my grandparents aged. And you just bring a whole different perspective when you can look at somebody and go, I really understand what you're feeling. That's a big check the box to open up the door for communication. So that's a great perspective.
I've told this story to Lisa on several different occasions, but had I known they were here 3 years ago, my family's life would have been a whole lot easier because they're the wealth of information that they are. And I think that's what hopefully people will take from this, is that there is hope out there, and there are actual resources that can be of tremendous help.
Absolutely. You kind of get stuck in that bubble, and it's hard to get past what you're doing day to day. Absolutely. All right, Sarah, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and a little bit of your background?
Yeah, of course. Thank you for having me today. I'm at Palm Point with Kevin as well. My name's Sarah Summy. I'm the Director of Business Development. And I come with about 17 years of healthcare experience, with the last 10 of those being spent in the behavioral health field. I have a background in clinical psychology, and I'm also working on healthcare administration. So I've moved out of the clinical space of things as a clinician and into more administrative, but I've served in roles such as admissions. So I know how to fight that good fight with insurance and what it takes to get authorization, and reasons things may be denied, and what clients are going through that front end when they're reaching out to care. And then have worked also in business development and in counseling, direct care. So lots of different vantage points coming here. Really excited to be serving our senior space. We're opening our mature adult unit next month. So I have really been able to bring that passion for helping people into this space, and I'm excited to be able to help today.
Awesome. Well, thank you for being here.
Of course.
And finally, we're super excited to have Dr. Dunn here. Dr. Dunn, would you tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do in the community for us?
Sure. I'm a geriatric psychiatrist. I'm in private practice in Melbourne. I've been here for more than 20 years. I see patients in my office, but I also take care of patients in several of the local assisted living facilities and in the hospital. I've held a variety of positions through the years, but continue to stick with my private practice. That's sort of been the anchor of everything else that I've done. One of my great passions in life is taking care of and advocating for the elderly, and trying to provide education and support and treatment, and getting people connected with the resources that are available to them here. I frequently tell people that they do not understand and appreciate how rich this area is in resources for the older population compared to many other parts of this country. So I'm very happy to participate today.
Well, we appreciate you, and we appreciate all you do for especially our clients. We love our clients dearly at Aging Matters in Brevard, and it's important to have people like you and this panel in our community to be on our side to help us. So Dr. Dunn, I want to start with you. Depression has many symptoms and can be undiagnosed or misdiagnosed in some older adults because sadness is not their main symptom sometimes. What are some of the symptoms of depression in older adults, and what should we be looking for?
probably most commonly, the older person, instead of complaining of sadness or depression, will complain of anxiety. That will be their primary complaint. And that is the reason why many patients, when they first seek treatment because they're uncomfortable, because they're not feeling well, will be given anti-anxiety medicines. And unfortunately, the anti-anxiety medicines really don't treat the underlying problem, and they come with a lot of potential side effects, particularly for our older patients. So that is of concern, and we really encourage providers to look under the surface and see what else is going on. People frequently complain of insomnia, or you will see that they suddenly have a 20-pound weight loss. And so sometimes people will become very focused on physical complaints. People will complain that their stomach is bothering them, or they feel dizzy all the time, or they're constipated. So frequently, older people do not use the kind of language that those of us in the mental health world would use, and certainly they don't use the language in the DSM-5. And so you really need to have a high index of suspicion for depression when an older person presents with some of these other kinds of more vague symptoms.
Is it, right now, of course, we're living through this pandemic, and at the beginning of this whole pandemic, I said to coworkers and staff that this is going to be a marathon, not a sprint. And I've been encouraging everybody, to take COVID one day at a time. Just for our staff alone, it has been exhausting and debilitating. So are we seeing all of these signs and symptoms, depression with our older adults, being intensified because of COVID? And what are we seeing happening because of COVID? Is it worse? What's going on?
From my perspective, things are much worse. People who had a component of anxiety to their depression are much more anxious now. Many of their support systems have been yanked out from underneath them because of the isolation caused by COVID and the need to protect oneself and others. The only people that I see that have sort of skated through this are people who tend to be isolative as a normal part of their daily living and their own personality. And so the people that don't normally have a lot of contact with other people, who don't really care whether they're alone or not, are pretty much unfazed by this. But nearly everybody else, it's made people much more depressed, much more anxious, and it's limited some of their resources that they've used to cope with things in the past.
So being an extrovert like myself, it's been very hard. I get it. I miss people.
Yeah.
I miss people, smiles, and sounds, music, and stuff. So is there anything to do to help decrease this developing depression in older adults during COVID? What can we do right now, Dr. Dunn, that might, like, I hate to say put a Band-Aid over it, because I don't want to use that, but can help us get through this pandemic?
Well, absolutely. There are some key recommendations that I provide to people all the time. First of all, I encourage people to limit their exposure to the news. Mm-hmm. I recommend people have one source of information that they check in once a day to get an update, so they are up to speed with anything they need to know. But then they need to turn the TV off, they need to turn the radio off, they need to turn the phone off, so that they are not constantly bombarded by all of the very anxiety-producing information that's out there. The second thing that I frequently talk to people about is encouraging them to sort of think outside of the box. Yes, being social, being with other people, going to church, going to the gym is an important part of maintaining your physical and mental health, but you cannot do that now, at least not the way that you used to. So how do we create workarounds? Can you go to the park with a friend and sit in some beach chairs, 6 feet apart, and spend an hour together visiting? Can you attend religious services online? So how do you help substitute some of those regular behaviors that kept you healthy, kept you from being more anxious, helped treat your depression. How do you do that in a different way now? Now you need to go for a mile walk in the morning, and you have to do it by yourself. You can't go with 5 friends anymore. So that has really been a key focus of my treatment in the past 6 months, is really encouraging people to rethink how they do things, because this is not going to go away. And so you can't just wait for some quick fix. I don't think you can wait for a vaccine. I don't think you can wait for this to magically go away. This is going to be with us for quite a while.
One of the things that I like to say at our house is we turn on the news just to see where the hurricanes are, and then we turn it off.
Exactly.
So maybe redefining what you need to see on the news and actually saying it out loud. We do a hurricane watch, since there's like 7 of them out there right now.
Yes. I've had some patients appoint one person as their news person. And if there's something that they need to know, like a hurricane is coming, that person promises they will call them and let them know. Otherwise, they're not paying any attention to anything that might upset them.
Well, we have up at our McDonald's here that's close to where I live in Vieira, we have a group of men that, since I've lived here, have gotten together every Friday morning for coffee and a sausage biscuit. And I was sitting up there not eating McDonald's, totally lying. I was eating McDonald's in the morning, and they went through and they all got their order, and they parked in the parking lot and situated themselves more than 6 feet apart and sat and had coffee and their biscuit. Is that something that would be okay to do, Dr. Dunn, if you felt like you needed to speak to somebody?
Absolutely.
They're really cute.
Yes, I've seen people parked at the art museum parking lot, and they had hatchbacks, and each one sat in the back of their own vehicle, and they parked the cars at angles, and they all had something to drink and some food to eat, and they had their own little gathering, and that worked really well. And that's about as safe as you can be. And you really need to maintain those social connections. So no matter how you do it safely, you need to find a way to do it. And many houses of worship are now trying to find ways to have some services outside. They're having smaller services. And I encourage people to try and find some flexibility in terms of how they're used to doing things, and be willing to do it a different way if necessary.
Absolutely.
And Marty, I have a little something to add into, being in, all of this pandemic issues at this point right now. We are very close with, sometimes a little too close with the people that we live with, our family, our spouses, our children, whatever it is. So like you had said, Dr. Dunn, is having those connections with people outside, maintaining the friendships and the relationships that we have with other people besides our connections right in our own immediate home. I think we all can probably understand that, being around your spouse or significant other for the past 6 months, day in and day out, can be a little exhausting. Never mind having your children probably attached to your side. So maintaining those relationships. And we also live in a very close-knit neighborhood, and there's a couple that are seniors down the street from us, and they used to have friends over every weekend, and now we see them. They plop their little chairs outside in their driveway, and they socially distance, and there's about 2 or 3 of them, that they all just sit there, and they have they bring their own food and they bring their own drinks, and they just sit and enjoy each other's company. It is important to really get outside of the house and try to maintain safety as well as, friendships too, for sure.
Absolutely. It's changed the way. There's been some good things with COVID that have come out, and that is that I have got to spend a lot of time with my family, but it's I miss people. And so recreating and redefining how that works is super important, and that it's okay to change. So Allie, the next question is for you. I've always heard that you should keep busy and get out to do things to help with depression, but with COVID and social distancing, that seems impossible. We kind of started this conversation what other suggestions do you have that help with isolation? Mostly
Sure.
isolation. Let's talk about that person that their caregiver may live on the west coast of Florida and they're here. What can we do to help them with social isolation, and what can we do?
You know, I think the biggest task and difficult scenarios that we're running into right now is our older seniors, you know, that the ones in their 80s or 90s might not have that technology. And that technology is what we are really running into, that we need to have to be able to communicate with others. For those that have that technology, you know, there's like you had mentioned, Dr. Dunn, too, about worship and having it online. There's a lot of virtual churches and praise that is happening at this point. You know, a lot of neat things too. If you're into the gardening, there's a lot of free virtual garden tours that you can do throughout the whole country, you know, and those are some of the resources that I'll give people as well for the links, you know, towards the end of the video, is different virtual gardening tours throughout the country, or even across, you know, on the Big Island too. Book clubs, you know, they have some great virtual book clubs too. I know that a lot of people, you know, liked to read, and they would go and join, and everyone would gather around and talk about their books or what was happening in the chapters and whatnot. So you can do that. Of course, a lot of this is technology wise, so it's a little bit more difficult for some of the seniors who may not have that ability or don't know the Zoom and keeping in touch with families. One thing too that I think is a really good idea, and it kind of links to some of our resources that Aging Matters has too, is adopting a pet. I think we need to remember that those pets are big companions for a lot of our seniors. Now, we don't want to take away the fact of having them needing to walk them or, you know, feed them too, but, you know, not only do we help with meals for our seniors, but we help with the pet food too. So, you know, especially those seniors that are isolated, they are the only one living in there. Pets, or a cat is a great companion. They're very low maintenance. You know, they will snuggle with you if you get the right one, and just really kind of enjoying that. You know, besides a dog and a cat, there's lots of others too. So, and there's a lot of different adoption sites around that will give some links and resources too. So, just really kind of just enjoying your time with whoever you can, out and about, and keeping socially distant, and trying your best to do everything online. So there are some, when I was kind of looking up some information too about resources, there are some tech classes that will help out to seniors and help them kind of get acquainted with their either cell phone or their tablet or their laptop. So we'll be able to get those resources to you guys as well.
I think that's a big key component is technology. You know, my mom's getting much better at it now, and it makes me happier because I know she can get more resources. But my grandfather, he was that commercial, you know, he's like, there's a mute button, you know, when he was alive. So, you know, trying to figure out that balance and get some resources to your loved one and really connect with them. There's some great ways to, as they call face calling, FaceTime and different things like that. So, so Kevin, what role does a caregiver play to help the family members through this pandemic? Because you're kind of carrying a dual role as a caregiver. You have all your emotions that are going on as you're caring for your loved one. You have your family, your current family that you're living with, and maybe job problems. Give us some advice and how we can work through this during a pandemic time.
Yeah, so it's a big challenge. And again, you know, as I mentioned previously during the introductions, you know, I do have some experience with this. You know, a few years back, my mom passed away, and unfortunately, right after that, my father had been diagnosed with a brain tumor, and unfortunately needed back-to-back surgeries in order to rectify that situation. It came to a point where he was no longer able, obviously, to be at home by himself and even with a caregiver. So we made the decision to go ahead and have him placed in a facility that could better serve his needs. And that was a challenge for, my family to make that decision, because he had a big house over on the beach and, loved his neighborhood, but he was just unable to care for himself, even with our support and support of, an in-home caregiver. So I think really, what I sort of learned during this, not only from all my years of experience working with children and families and adults and seniors and all that kind of good stuff, but, we have to sort of be just present as much as we possibly can. And that may sound sort of oversimplified, but it's the truth. What sort of worked for us and worked for a lot of people that were in similar situations to us was we sort of created just a family support system of family and friends that were available, that we had a standing sort of visitation schedule. Unfortunately, this was all pre-COVID. So now that you kind of throw COVID into the mix and the whole pandemic, we are still sort of on that schedule, only we're doing it more by phone. We're doing it more by calling the facility, by checking in, by just still having that presence, in his life or in your person's life is really important. And technology aside, sometimes it is just a phone call. Sometimes it's just checking in. With my dad, I know it's checking in to let him know we're originally from Boston. Hey, the Red Sox are on TV this afternoon. You have your baseball package, you can watch the game. Or, hey, the Patriots and the Celtics are playing this weekend. Make sure you take some time to kind of watch those games, because those are the things that bring joy to his life. And he, likes the opportunity to sit and watch the ball game like that. If he could read the paper and watch the ball game, he'd be completely fine. So, the other thing is really talking about, building on what Dr. Dunn said previously, and even what Allie was kind of saying, is that, looking at the different tips that can help is really focusing too, like on their health, right? Focusing on the importance of sleep and making sure that they have a regular sleep schedule. I know from my dad, when he was feeling a little depressed, he had a tendency to sleep more. He was napping more. He was sleeping more. And that was kind of a concern, to make sure that we were kind of keeping him on a regular schedule. Talking about, well, yeah, you're not tired now because you slept for, 5 hours this afternoon over 2 different naps, so really getting the appropriate amount of rest is important. Anything you can do to help with meal prep. A lot of times what happened after my mom passed and before he became sick, there was a lot of time where I'd kind of pop over and, my dad kind of became the ultimate bachelor, and he was always like that anyway, where he would be able to have that time and not really have to be out and about. But, Dad, those leftovers have been in there for a little bit. Why don't we get some fresh stuff? Why don't we work on, hey, let's cook things so you have them. I was a regular frequent flyer at Petty's, the meat market, just going over and getting the pre-made stuff so he could just literally just pop it into the oven or put it in the microwave, cook it, and have it for 3 or 4 days. So meal prep is really important. Ensuring they're getting that proper nutrition, making sure that they're eating regularly, that they're not getting into this habit where they're just kind of eating, once every couple days, and their nutrition falls apart and then they become more lethargic. So that was something that was really important that we found to be challenging at first to address. Physical activity, trying to get them out and about as much as they possibly can. I know that unfortunately I've not been able to see my dad since March. And I have the opportunity to see him again this week, which we're excited about. But even before COVID was, again, trying to get him out. He's in this beautiful facility now. He's lucky to be where he is. But just to get him outside to go to the dock, to throw a fishing line in the water, or to go for a walk around the facility, or go downstairs and sit with the Veterans Club and have a conversation with them, just making sure that they have some kind of physical activity. And for my dad, where he lives, it's down the end of a hallway. So if my dad walked up and down the hallway 2 or 3 times a day, he'd be getting plenty of exercise. So it doesn't have to be these grandiose, visions of going to the park or going to the beach. It could be simply just getting up, getting out of your room, and going for a walk down the hallway. So that physical activity is really, really important. Social connectedness. So again, in this time of COVID, it is great to have all this technological sort of availability. My dad is not one of those guys. He doesn't know a FaceTime from a Yahoo to a Google to a whatever. He knows how to turn his TV on. He knows where SportsCenter is. He knows where A&E or the different, war shows and all the different veterans things are. And that's kind of it. He's sort of a newspaper and get his mail and watch SportsCenter, and that's what his day revolves around. it could go a couple of days where I can't even get a hold of him because his cell phone, he thinks constantly needs to be charged. So it's always plugged in and away from where he is. And I'm like, Dad, you got a battery life on there, big guy. Like, you just got to pick the phone up. It's okay. And he struggles with that. So again, it's just, calling ahead to his caregivers, checking in, making sure he's okay, having that conversation, being able to have those points of contact, I think are really important. Especially if someone's in assisted living or skilled nursing, having those points of contact so you know who to contact and who to call. And then obviously, with people that might be in situations that they're not in a facility, is looking at what the options are for any kind of in-home services so that we know that they're having some of those things being taken care of. And then from there, just reviewing if these things are, if this continues and this depression and these sadness and all these symptoms continues, obviously looking at what are the potential treatment options. Is there something out there? Again, if they're alone or they're by themselves, are they appropriate to be alone and by themselves? Can they still live by themselves? If not, what are their options for that? And just looking at that from a totality of the situation, I think is really, really important. Everybody's situations are different. Everybody has more means than some, or some have less. And it's just really challenging to try to figure that out and do the best you can. I think sort of my last point is being a caregiver is so important, so much so that when you fly on a plane, they tell you if the oxygen mask drops, you put that on your face first, and then you address the person next to you or the child next to you. And I think in this case, that goes without saying, because if you're a caregiver, Marty, you alluded to this, you have potentially your own family, your own jobs, your own stressors, all these things happening. I know when we were going through the situation, it was almost all around the clock sort of thing. And it got to the point where we were really dragging, so much so that the neurologist finally gave us orders. You are to go home and stay there. If there are any problems, we will call you. I do not want to see you back in this hospital. And he actually gave a lecture to my sister about that because she chose to not heed his advice, and he was not pleased with her when he walked in and saw her sitting there. So again, it's taking care of yourself, understanding that, you have to be fit and able to do the things that you need to for your loved one. But you also have to take care of yourself. And that's really, really important. So I think those are the topics that we talk that are really important.
Absolutely. When you were talking earlier, when you started telling your story, I wrote self-care on my paper because, there's programs out there like we have Meals on Wheels. We have several home care services. And even though those come into place, you kind of sometimes have this I used to feel guilty when I would leave them and I would go home and try to get done what I needed to get done. I would hurry real fast, take care of everything I needed to go. My husband was great at helping out here with the kids at the time. And I'd go back because I felt guilty. And it sometimes takes that other person. It was our hospice nurse that looked at me and said, "You're not okay. You need to start self-caring." And so, making sure that you recognize that, and that as the caregiver that you also might need some help working through some of the depression and the anxiety that you're dealing with. So super important. That could be a whole nother topic. We can start a whole series. Yeah,
absolutely.
So Dr. Dunn, what other mental health issues are common in older people? And is there an overlap between medical illness and mental health illness? Do we see that happen sometimes?
Oh, all the time. I already alluded to the fact that older people tend to complain of more anxiety as opposed to depression. And the anxiety is really more a symptom of the depression than an anxiety disorder itself. You see people become so depressed that their thinking becomes very distorted, and they can develop delusions, which are fixed false beliefs. And particularly in older people, it has to do with physical illness. So frequently you will have someone who will tell you that they're convinced that they have colon cancer. And there's nothing wrong with their colon, but they have a very, very, very severe depression. You treat the depression and their worry about their physical health goes away. It also gets very complicated because many of the ways we have to treat depression and anxiety involves the use of medications. And the medications have potential side effects, which are potentially more prominent in older people. And the older you are and the frailer you are and the more medications that you take for other issues, the more prone you are to interactions and side effects. And then, of course, you have people who are developing neurocognitive disorders. So frequently, older people, as they're starting to develop some kind of dementia, will first present with a depression or an anxiety disorder late in life. And that is really a warning flag that something's going on in the brain. And so you can't really just look at the isolated symptom or the isolated episode. You have to look at other areas in their life and how they're functioning in other areas, because there's probably something else going on and you need to bring in additional resources and address other issues.
My grandmother had a UTI also, and
Yeah.
so she was doing something with her hands, and I asked her what she was doing, and she was from Poland and she knew how to make lace. So she was making lace.
Yeah.
So there's a lot that can go on with the physical that definitely crosses over. So
Absolutely.
we appreciate that. So Ms. Lisa, seniors 65 and older say that they can handle it themselves, and only 43% seek help from a health professional. Clinical depression is a very treatable illness, and more than 80% of the people with depression can be successfully treated with medication, psychotherapy, or a combination of both. However, many seniors don't seek help. So Lisa, how can we get our professionals to discuss with all of our older adults at their monthly, quarterly, and yearly visits to be considered, that it's not considered taboo with the older population? How do we talk to our parents, grandmothers about we need to talk to our healthcare professionals?
That can be a challenge, because a lot of times our parents and our grandparents, they grew up and they were kind of told to maybe push things under the rug, or they didn't talk about those feelings of sadness and anxiety. I remember my grandmother, she had 8 brothers and sisters, and they never really talked about how they felt, but they always had a nerve pill just to help them. So, as my grandmother was aging, I really had to talk with her about truly sharing her feelings with her physicians and things like that. And one of the things, we here on this panel, we are mental health professionals. I also worked in the hospital for 20 years, and some physicians aren't real comfortable approaching or talking about mental illness or depression either. So what I found oftentimes was I would take and again, Kevin, I was in the same boat with you and with Marty. I was a caregiver to both my father, who suffered from early onset Alzheimer's, and also for my grandmother. And that was one of the things, is I would take them to maybe their primary care physician and talk with them about some of their symptoms. And as Dr. Dunn said, oftentimes they describe their symptoms as GI symptoms, or, something other than the typical depression or hopelessness and things like that we're aware of. And the doctors would run tests and they'd come back and they'd say everything's fine. Some doctors just weren't comfortable with addressing the psychological side of things. So I am a huge proponent in educating, number one, some of our primary care physicians, and if we can't find anything wrong, can we start looking at, some of those psychological issues? If we're not finding that there's anything wrong with them from a GI perspective, maybe we can do some testing. I thank God every day for Dr. Dunn, because I know that she gets to see a lot of the clients that I work with, because, when we can't find anything from a physical perspective that's wrong, then we do start doing some, psychological testing and things like that, and then bring them in to see somebody that specializes in that. But with some of the things that I do with a lot of my clients and with their families, is I ask them to write logs. And even in some of the assisted living facilities and the skilled nursing facilities, because they may be seeing behaviors that aren't normal for their client or for their loved one. And so I ask them, let's start writing down what's going on. We recently just had somebody in a facility who was acting out typically at a certain time during the day, but it wasn't all days. And it turned out, after we started working with the family and everything, that they were kind of having one of the caregivers reminded them of her son. And she and her son actually had, some animosity for each other. And when that caregiver was on, she was acting up a little more than she would with some other people. So, I really think from a family perspective or a caregiver perspective, kind of start writing things down in a log. You'll notice once you do that, what sleeping patterns are, or are they not getting enough sleep? Are they not eating enough? Are there times when they, are tearful in their bed, or they are acting out and they're getting angry? So I think all of those things are things that I suggest for families and caregivers to monitor and to document, and then to bring to those physicians' appointments. One nice thing over the last few years is Medicare did initiate also that wellness exam. So anybody that is a Medicare recipient is receiving that annual wellness exam. And in that wellness exam, they are monitoring things and looking at things like depression. They're doing depression scales, they're looking at fall scales, but they're looking at eating and sleeping and all those types of things. So I think that's something that's very positive that we put in place in the last few years as well, in order to be able to address, some of the depression and psychological issues at those physicians' appointments as well.
So let me just give you a scenario. Let's say I take my grandmother to her doctor's appointment, and she's been saying she's been suffering from a stomach ache. She also used to take a nerve pill. I remember that. It made me smile when you said it. But as I speak to that physician, he's like, you know what? I've run every test. She has nothing wrong with her. I don't know what to tell you to do. What would be my next step in order to help my grandmother try to find some kind of bridge building doctor that would help me a little bit with her depression and her mental health needs?
A lot of times what we will do is kind of sit down and look at their story and talk with their family. Occasionally we will look at maybe doing some neuropsychological testing just to see what's going on. Sometimes, I work with pharmacists as well to look at medications, to make sure that there's not something going on with medications too. A referral to either, maybe a therapist if you think that some talk therapy may help and they may benefit from that. Like I said, I refer a lot of my clients to Dr. Dunn. Obviously, there's also some, senior wellness programs, and I know you all are going to open your older adult program too at Palm Point. So I think those are some resources that we have here as well. Through this COVID pandemic, we've also been doing some virtual support groups. I wasn't sure how that was going to work at first, but I've actually been very pleased with some of the clients that have been there. But then we've also broken it up now into two, where we have a caregiver support group as well, because what we were hearing was a lot of the caregivers were feeling some anxiety about the fact that their family members, they weren't able to see their family members, and they were seeing, I have anxiety. My mother is a healthy 73-year-old lady. Oh, she might kill me for saying that on here. Very healthy. She walks 4 to 5 miles a day. But she hasn't been able to give my son a hug, in 6 months. She will come to my driveway and we'll sit there, but that's what she said. I just want to hug my grandson. So that gives me anxiety, so those support groups, what we found, have been real helpful for both the caregiver, but then also those people that are, at home, our seniors that are at home and not getting out and doing the things that they like to do.
So I think one of the things that I'm going to highlight is, don't give up. There are resources out there. If you hit that wall where your primary physician maybe won't go any farther, reach out to One Senior Place, Aging Matters, Palm Point, and we'll make sure all of these resources are listed on this video once we release it. So we want to make it a lot easier for you to get the help that you may need for your parent or your grandmother or grandfather. It does get overwhelming.
Marty, one thing I was going to say too, to build on Lisa's point, is sometimes some of the things work too is that there is that stigma with mental health, and you get people from that age group and that generation, and they're not comfortable with that. So sometimes even like less formalized supports are helpful. Like, for my dad, it was, just connecting to somebody with his church that him and my mom used to go to, not necessarily a licensed person, or it was just somebody that was just there as like a community support. And he found that really helpful. And I know a lot of people in his facility have found things like that helpful, where it's maybe not the stigma of going to a therapist or seeing a psychiatrist, which, all have their place. I mean, they're incredibly important, but it's also something that's familiar to them, and they feel like they're getting something out of it without having to sort of give in to that quote unquote stigma. And that can be challenging as the caregiver to try to get that in place. But for them, I've seen that that's been incredibly successful too. Thanks.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So Sarah, the cost of healthcare for older Americans that have symptoms of depression is about 50% higher than non-depressed older adults. How can we help to get financial support to help with the cost of care?
$1 million question, right?
Right. It's tough.
Yeah, so I think to start assessing the individual's insurance coverage and understanding what that includes. I know when my dad turned 65, and he's a retired mechanical engineer and Navy veteran, so he is pretty sharp, but it was still so confusing for him, this really smart, intelligent man, to take a look at Medicare and understand what that covered, and then it was a whole different animal when you started getting into Medicare HMOs and supplements and that type of thing. So I think it's important to help our seniors really understand what their coverage is, what that really looks like, and what it means. And then in addition, really trying to identify if there's any type of supplemental coverage that they're eligible for. So my dad, being a Navy veteran, had never taken advantage of VA benefits, for example. So we were able to get him onto VA benefits, and that automatically covered all his prescription medications and all his wellness primary care visits as well. Which also staying in touch with primary care doctors is important. Medicare offers one free depression screening per year for everyone. And then based on that screening, the individual may be eligible for other options. So I think it's really important to just understand what the coverage looks like and what it entails, so that you're able to make the best decision. So am I seeing a psychiatrist or a therapist that's a Medicare participant, or did I select one that's not, and I'm going to get a big bill on the back end? I think that that's really important as well. But once you've done all that and you've decided, okay, I have the right plan, I have the best coverage that I can afford or that's offered and available to me, there are some options for free care. So you could seek out support groups. I know Lisa had mentioned they have support groups. Peer Support Space has a senior support group, Mental Health Coalition of Florida. There's actually a national coalition on mental health for aging of Florida that a lot of people don't know about. And they offer a lot of good family-to-family support groups that support not only the senior or the mature adult, but the family as well. And then just really looking at other options such as discounts on pharmacy medicine. So a lot of the pharmacies such as Publix, I know Walmart's participating, CVS participates in $2, $4, and $10 prescriptions on generic drugs that are commonly prescribed. So that's another option. There's always also seeking out your religious resources. So does your church have any type of resources you could tap into? Let's say that mom, dad, or grandma, grandpa had to be stabilized psychiatrically and you have a big bill now, can church help with that? Because a lot of churches have reserve funds for just incidences like that. And I know that it's really difficult. We all mentioned that they may be stubborn and don't want to seek help or ask for that, but that's something that a lot of times loved ones or caregivers can engage in for them. I know Catholic Charities of Central Florida, Jewish Family Services, the Elder Coalition of Central Florida, those are lots of options that do help in out-of-pocket expenses for not only elderly folks, but everyone. So those are some options. I think just remembering you're not alone and reaching out to these agencies is the big takeaway and the big key. But I think it's really important to really understand what your coverage is before you start seeking out care, so that way you are fully transparent and you know what additional resources you need to gather.
Awesome. And one thing that I learned really quick with my family situation is we appointed one family member that dealt with that on behalf of, because it got extremely confusing for a little while. It was my grandparents raised me, so I was like one of the siblings. So it was myself and my two aunts. And boy, did it, and finally we kind of looked at each other and we're like, okay, one person. And my mom had the legal background, so she ended up dealing with all of that. So I think staying organized also in your family unit, to try to help is super important, because sometimes we can overhelp.
Yes.
And it becomes chaos.
You have one person doing something and the next person not, and then before you know it, like with my dad, who had some depression a couple years back when his older brother died, we were all trying to help, and then eventually it got so convoluted that it was just, well, forget it, I'm fine. Because nobody wants to feel like a burden, especially, our parents and grandparents or aunts, whoever it may be, our loved ones, as they start to get older. That's their biggest thing, is I don't want to feel like a burden. And depression makes you feel like a burden to everyone around you. And then you add advanced age to that. And so a lot of times it's just pushing it to the side and trying to, I'll be fine.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Go ahead. Marty, sorry, I just want to touch on this real quickly too. Just, when we were talking about some of the resources, Sarah, that you were saying about free care, or, other options out there, if there are any other underlying conditions, if someone has Parkinson's or someone has cancer or something, and, it's causing a lot of this depression, there are other funds and grants that you can get certain bills paid for. So even though if you need to maybe pay for some of the mental health, you might be able to get the underlying condition covered, so it's kind of a swapping, I guess you could do. So there are some options out there, and I've got a good friend who works in billing and Health First, so I can get some of those resources as well to be able to have, different links and sites and grants and, organizations that can help with whether it be Parkinson's or cancer, or, whatever there might be under there. So, kind of thinking outside of the box a little bit.
Absolutely. And that's important, is that there's no right or wrong or right way to do it. It's just a matter of seeking what you need and obtaining that information. And I think that's important, and staying organized. Got to stay organized, or else it gets out of control. So I'm going to ask just a couple more questions, and we're going to wrap this up, because we want to try to keep this under an hour so we don't lose people. But Dr. Dunn, how are we treating depression in our older adults? What is some of the ways that you're treating depression?
Well, there are a number of approaches, particularly with older people. I look at environmental issues first. So I want to make sure that people are warm and they're hydrated and they're fed, and that those immediate needs are being met. Because if those are not being met, it doesn't matter what else I do, or anybody else does for that matter. So we really look at environmental issues first. We want to make sure that they're in a safe place, and that if there is a caregiver, that they are treating them well and responsibly. If people are not being treated well, if they're in some kind of abusive relationship, again, it doesn't matter what I would do with medications or anything else if that situation is untenable. The second thing I look at is medical issues. Are there undiagnosed, unresolved, untreated medical issues that could be contributing to the depression? Does someone have a vitamin deficiency? Does someone have a thyroid deficiency? If we treat those things, their depressive symptoms may go away, and I don't need to complicate things further by adding more medicines to the mix. Frequently, I use antidepressants and prescribe them generally to begin with in very small doses and very slowly increase them. Older people frequently require much smaller doses of those medications. I explore whether people would benefit from being engaged in some kind of psychotherapy, whether it would be an individual therapy or family therapy or group therapy. I look at whether someone would be a candidate for one of the intensive outpatient programs. Sometimes I have to determine whether someone is so ill they really need to be in the hospital. So I approach it from many different angles, try and start off with the simplest things first, and the least intrusive things first, and then work my way up based primarily on severity of the illness.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. So, once we've spent this time talking, it's a topic that we need to be extremely educated on, especially because more than likely, if you're not a caregiver now, you will become a caregiver, and we're all aging. So it's all going to catch up with us eventually. But what I want to do is I want to go down the line, and I want just real quick, I want to know what your favorite resources in Brevard County for addressing some of these issues. So Kevin, let's start with you. What's your favorite resource?
Boy, there's a bunch, but I tell you right now, I'm going to go right off the bat, and I'm going to give Lisa a plug. It's that One Senior Place, man. That is a one-stop shop for everything that you need, and if it's not there, they will help you find it.
Absolutely. Lisa, what's your favorite place?
Can I say One Senior Place?
You can. Absolutely. We love One Senior Place. You guys really are.
Before I started working there, they did help me with my dad as well. That was one of the reasons that I chose to leave the hospital and come to One Senior Place because, I was in the hospital. I had a lot of resources. My father was a neuropsychologist in the area. He had a lot of resources, and we still kept running into brick walls. And I thought, my gosh, here we are, and we have a lot of help, and we know a lot of people, and I can't imagine somebody that didn't have this. So One Senior Place was actually very helpful to me with my family as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think that was an eye-opener for me too. We had felt like we had unlimited resources, but we were hitting walls all over the place.
And
so
I know with One Senior Place, we still, a lot of the people that we do see at One Senior Place, we obviously refer to Aging Matters to help. All of those resources there, the Sunflower House, and then just to help with, obviously, the Meals on Wheels. Allie, you mentioned even with the pets. That's been something I didn't know about, and I was so happy to learn about because I had a client that the reason that she even hired me was because she wanted she didn't want to go to the hospital unless she knew somebody was going to be able to help with her animals. So just knowing that, they were there to help provide a meal on Saturdays sometimes for her dog and things like that. So Aging Matters has been a blessing, to the people that I do consults with as well.
We're so glad. We're so glad. Dr. Dunn, what is your favorite resource?
I can't give you just one. I have in my office a hand-painted bucket from the Amish country of Pennsylvania, and it is filled, it's overflowing with all kinds of resource materials. I have pamphlets, I have business cards, I have handouts, and I am constantly crouching down on the floor and sorting through that bucket to find what I need for each particular person. And I just feel very blessed that I have a bucket that is so filled with so many resources. So I can't pick just one, but it's wonderful to have so many options.
Absolutely, absolutely. Sarah, what is your favorite?
Yeah, I gotta be honest with you. I feel the same. I'm just now learning of many of these resources, but all of you have been immensely helpful, and I can't say enough about the work that you do. It's not easy work. It's not for the faint at heart. So I'm just grateful to have all of you. I was fortunate to go with Kevin to one senior place. I've never seen anything quite like it.
Yeah.
I wish they had that for all mental health. I think we should have little hubs where people can just walk in and get what they need. But I thought it was really cool. Everything from budgeting to legal issues, health issues, all right there in one place was pretty incredible.
Absolutely. They're really a great resource. Great resource. All right, Allie, who's your favorite?
You know, I'm just going to run off the edge here and just be a little biased. I'll say us, Aging Matters. And the reason why I'm just touching on it is, you know, when I was a social worker out in the community, I didn't realize everything that Aging Matters did until I actually got here. You know, I had these copied papers that were copied from someone else, that was from someone else, that was from someone else, and it was actually our caregiver resource book. And when I got here, I glued all the pieces together and I was like, holy cow, this is everything that we do. So, you know, I mean, it's all under one umbrella, which is pretty cool. So, you know, there's obviously, you know, like everyone else, there are other resources out there that is really hard to distinguish, but that's
Absolutely. I love Aging Matters too, I have to say. I've worked for a lot of nonprofits, and this one is just an amazing organization. Everything that we fundraise for or do stays in the community. And I've seen lives change. One of the ladies that answers our phones for Meals on Wheels, I must act like I'm stressed out all the time at work, because she always comes in, she goes, I have a little pick-me-up. And it's normally a note from one of our Meals on Wheels clients that's saying exactly how they feel, as you know, as getting them food and getting their pets food with Pets on Wheels. And it's really great. No matter how much stress you're facing through the day, it can stop you in your tracks and go, okay, we're making lives change. And every single person on this panel is doing that. And that's why I wanted to get you all in one space. You know, I like to say right now during this time with pandemic circling around us, it's a great time to get to know the people in your neighborhood. I feel like Mr. Rogers had it going on, and he's right. You need to look at the people in your neighborhood, the resources that you have, the people. We all connect all the time, one way or the other, the people on this panel helping out our community, and also breaking it all the way down to actually your neighbors. Checking on them and making sure that they have everything they need and that we're supporting each other through this time. It's definitely a marathon. Before we wrap up today, does anybody have some last minute words of advice?
I just think, you know, kind of on a positive note, because we talk about the pandemic and, you know, some of the things that we are doing by thinking outside of the box. My son actually came to me and said something. He's 13, almost 14. But we had been, one of the neighborhoods around here had decided to do a big movie theater night, and people could come in and drive in. It was at the end of a cul-de-sac. And so you were seeing people that were ranging in age from, you know, 8 years old, maybe up to in their 70s or 80s. And it was kind of bringing them all together. And the older people were telling stories about the drive-in movie theaters. And my son had never even heard or seen of one. So I think, you know, through all this turmoil and trouble, there are positive things that are coming out of this.
Absolutely.
To see that younger generation connect with the older generation is just heartwarming to me. And I think it means something, you know, to both of them.
Absolutely. I've said that we've connected back with humanity again. You know, I think we're more willing to go out and talk to your neighbor if you see they're having a struggle. Where even a year ago, I probably would have gotten in my car because I was late to my 8 o'clock meeting, hoping that somebody else would address what was going on next door. And we don't do that anymore. This has really brought us grounded, and we are connecting. So, all right, everybody, I appreciate you. Does anybody else have anything else to add?
I would just say if you're in need of help, ask for help. And if you're a caregiver,
Absolutely.
actions don't have to be heroic. You just have to sometimes be present and be available. You don't have to go, just be there for them. Sometimes
Absolutely. And I feel like sometimes I've heard somebody say to me one time that I feel like if I'm asking for help, I'm weak. And I said, actually, I feel the other way. If you're asking for help, you're strong. The fact that you're willing to talk to me about it and try to produce some kind of plan is telling me that you're strong. So if anything, if we can get it across to our little county here, Brevard County, that we're here, ask for help. We need to do this together. We need to talk about mental health together. That's what's going to make us stronger. I think we've made a big dent today, you guys, and I appreciate your time.